That's why more people need to stand up and try to do what's right.
Hi guys. This has pretty much been
Jonathon Daily.
Let's move on to Hungary immigration policy. So it's another topic on immigration I think is relevant in this situation. Yes, in June 2024, the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, ruled Hungary broke EU's asylum laws and imposed. So essentially there's a dispute going on between Hungary and the EU. As of June 2024, the European Court of Justice, God, that sounds like an absolute corrupt little regime right there. The European Court of Justice, the EU. Gotta love them. They imposed a $200 million lump sum fine and plus £1 million, £1 million, £200 million, and a £1 million daily penalty for each day Hungary failed to comply. Hungary refuses to pay, and now Brussels has launched an offsetting procedure. The European Commission responded by deducting the fine and accrued daily penalties directly from the EU budget funds that would otherwise be dispersed to Hungary in a process called offsetting. So Hungary's refusing to pay, so the money that should be going to Hungary for various reasons, whatever the EU is supposed to fund, they are deducting the amount of the fines from those funds that Hungary should be receiving. Total penalties exceed $500 million. For a country the size of Hungary, that may be an absolute substantial amount. By April 2025, the financial impact had grown substantially. Daily fines continued to accumulate, amounting to well over £300 million. By then, offsetting deductions totaling approximately £357 million. Total penalties surpassing £500 million. So, wow. So what exactly is going on? Hungary's immigration policy. Specifically, it's the asylum and border enforcement approach that has been deemed by the EU, or the European Center for Justice, as they are not in compliance with the EU's regulations on that. So, Hungary's asylum policy key elements, transit zones and pushbacks. From 2015 to 2020, Hungary established transit zones on its southern border with Serbia, where asylum seekers were forced to wait in fenced camps while their applications were processed, often for months. This is allegedly. In 2020, the European Court of Justice system ruled that these transit zones were unlawful detention under EU law. Hungary closed the zones, but then implemented pushback laws, allowing authorities to summarily expel migrants without processing asylum claims. So we have a small country like Hungary who essentially what they did is they set up little concentration camps, we'll say, for asylum-seeking immigrants. And there's a broader issue. In all of Europe, they had a Syrian refugee crisis where there lots of Syrian refugees were coming in, flooding the countries. Now, a lot of these, I'm sure there were some good people. There's always good people, right? But how do you filter out the good people from the bad? And a lot of these refugees have almost completely destroyed certain cities in Europe and just having a horrible, devastating effect. So now you have a leader in Hungary who has set up these zones where we're going to say, okay, if you're actually claiming asylum, and let's be honest, I doubt these are like concentration camps. They probably feed them, they probably take care of them, and there's like, you need to stay here while we verify. Yeah, it can take forever because not everything is in the cloud, right? There's documents, there's paper, there's a paper trail they have to follow up to see if these people are actually claiming asylum. When we all know that in most countries, including the US, especially under the Biden administration, where all you had to do was check claiming asylum, no verification, nothing else needed, you automatically get in. No being held in a camp while verifications can happen. And once they're in, they almost never, I did an episode on this in the past, they almost never show up for their court dates. So once they're in the country, they're in. They don't show up for court dates, and then they're in illegally, and then we get to a crisis point, which is where we're at now. So anyways, that's one of the reasons for Hungary. The other reasons were automatic rejections and externalizations. This is just ChatGPT, which is an AI that compiles different news sources. So as we all know, generally news sources are going to be leaning left, which means this may or may not be true. But Hungary restricted asylum applications to only those who first sought asylum at a Hungarian embassy outside the country, usually in Belgrade or Kyiv. This rule made it nearly impossible for migrants to lodge asylum claims from within Hungary, violating the EU's Asylum Procedures Directive. Border fence and military enforcement. Hungary built razor wire border fence on the Serbian and Croatian borders. How dare they build a fence? All of this push to have no borders for any countries. It is a globalist push to ensure that we one day have a global government that can control and essentially enslave, and it'll be run by the 1% that has all the wealth in the world, and has all the control in the world, and they want all of you to have nothing and to just be good little worker ants and do what they say. So Yeah, that's enough on what's going on there, but that's just another immigration issue. And you see a small country like Hungary that's actually enforcing the law and trying to protect the citizens that it does have because of the massive amounts of dangerous, a lot of times, refugees and immigrants or immigrants that claim to be refugees that come into the country and then they end up being an absolute drag on the economy and the criminal system. And in America, social benefits, it just is not good. Now, I'm all for immigration. Immigration is great. A lot of the most successful, amazing people are immigrants. Some of the best people in America are immigrants who came here legally and assimilated and built themselves from the ground up. And hats off to those people. And I'm sure you are on my side when it comes to these people that do not follow the law and think they are above it. And honestly, do not contribute to society a lot of times. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So that's enough on that. And I just want to compare that. Let's talk about what's going on in LA and the immigration riots. And I want to compare it to January 6th. January 6th, 2020, when Biden was inaugurated and there was a so-called insurrection, right? These people were let in. These were American citizens that were literally let in, invited in by the federal police insiders who were told to do this. And they were insurrectionists. They were not violent. There was a couple spats that happened and someone did get hurt, or I believe there was one police officer that was harmed, but the people who started it were not violent. It was escalated by what I believe to be people that were paid to do so, but they were invited in. It was peaceful, and people went to jail for years. I've got this clip from this person here who actually, the charges were completely falsified. He was kept in jail until after the election, until after Donald Trump was elected, in prison for years over these charges. Life completely ruined. Just listen here.
We've got some more J6ers. Tell me your name.
I'm Pete Schwartz.
And how long were you charged for?
I was sentenced to 14 years and 2 months for obstruction of official proceeding. And I never set foot in the Capitol building.
Hold it, Pete, hang on. Obstruction of a federal proceeding was thrown out by the Supreme Court, I believe, as being totally illegitimate to charge you guys with, correct?
Absolutely.
And you got 14 years on something that's completely illegitimate? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's absolutely true. Everything they charged me with was just fabricated charges. And I don't know how they choose who they're going to charge what with, but they absolutely nailed me to the wall. And eventually I did end up getting my case overturned, but because of the politics and the optics that they're trying to present, which means it has nothing to do with justice, it's a legal industry, they held my appeal, and they held it so the oral arguments on my appeal was 1 week after the election. And my case did get reversed and remanded, but they didn't want that kind of information to come out before the election. They didn't want people to know that January 6ers were actually innocent and that they're platforming off of us. So
hold it. The day the Supreme Court overturned, I think it was the Fisher decision, they didn't come to your cell, unlock it, and say you're a free man, since the Supreme Court of the United States said it was totally illegitimate to charge you with that and all the other J6ers?
No, and as a matter of fact, I felt like that should have reversed everything at that point, but that's not even a win for everybody. At that point, they say that you have to then get your appeal in and see if the courts will give you that same win. Even though they said it's illegitimate, they know that you're there. They know you're being held illegitimately, but they're going to pull every trick in the book. Just like when they overturned my appeal and I had already won it, I didn't get released at that time either. That was 3 days before Trump gave me the pardons, but I didn't get to talk to my lawyers or anything. So I was completely unaware that I had won. I got out when Trump got in. And then days later, I found out that I had actually beat the case, but I would have never known.
Were you in a medium security?
No, they sent me to USPs, which are maximum security penitentiaries.
You were in a United States penitentiary?
2 of them. The worst, the most violent and dangerous prisons in the United States.
Why did you rate that? How many points you have?
I don't remember what it was because they recalculated it several times, but they made sure I was like 7 points over the limit to be in there. But when we were in the D.C. Gulag and we had a sheet that figured out your points, the way we calculated my points was I should have been in a camp or a low security.
And you went to a U.S. penitentiary?
Yeah.
Folks, you understand, U.S. penitentiaries are indescribable.
60% of the people in these prisons have at least 1 life sentence.
Unbelievable. And so, hold it. I just want to make sure. If President Trump had not won re-election, where would you be right now, sir?
I would still be in that prison. I am so grateful. And Jesus is my savior and Trump is my president.
So yeah, that's why we need to wake up, people, because we have actual illegal criminal immigrants throwing riot parties, burning, looting in LA. And then we have peaceful, actual American citizens getting absolutely their lives completely destroyed and called insurrectionists because they were invited by federal Capitol Police to come in Washington, D.C. to the White House and to explore. And it's not right, people. It doesn't sit right with me. It shouldn't sit right with you. So that's why more people need to stand up and try to do what's right. And yeah, that's where we're at.